Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Brajajana Ranjana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Brajajana Ranjana Jaya Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Jaya Kunja Vihari Chari Jaya Kunja Vihari Yamuna Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Girivardhari Yashodanandana Jaya Brajajana Ranjana Jaya Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Jaya Brajajana Ranjana Jaya Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Jaya Kunja Vihari Yamuna Tiravana Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna and welcome. I'm a guest, but I do welcome you. So as I was requested to speak on a few chapters from the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, covering the appearance, activities, character and teachings of Lord Rishabhadev, we'll finish, I guess, tonight, unless someone's going to continue, I'm not sure. No? Okay. So thus far we covered the birth. Oh, much better. Thank you. We covered the birth of Lord Rishabhadev. We also discussed some of his activities, his character, as taught in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And tonight we have left teachings of Lord Rishabhadev. This is what is covered in the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam. Let me just look that section up so I have it handy when the time comes. Okay, and I'll take half a minute to offer obeisances to my spiritual masters. Om Jnanatimidandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Bhande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I just remember one little detail from my visit to Africa. I was in Africa just a couple of weeks ago. And with devotees there, when you lecture, you have to be careful. You have to be sure that you want to say Hare Krishna. Because if you say Hare Krishna, they say the whole mantra and 3 times. So if you say too many times, there's not much time left for the lecture. Okay, so in the previous chapter it was said how Lord Rishabhadev, with his 100 sons, some of whom were very, very famous personalities even today, which is many thousands and thousands of years later, he went with them on some kind of expedition, and there he met some Brahmins who were holding discussions, and Lord Rishabhadev heard from these Brahmanas. Not only that he heard from the Brahmanas, but he also engaged his sons in hearing from these Brahmanas. After the Brahmanas made their presentations, then Lord Rishabhadev pulled his sons, his 100 sons, to the side. And then he gave him some instructions. Of course, Lord Rishabhadev has been instructing his sons throughout his life, but this is specific because these are sort of final instructions. Final instructions because right after giving these instructions, Lord Rishabhadev is going to retire from, well, don't want to quite call it mundane life, but sort of secular life, and is going to take to the life of renunciation. And so before moving away from his family, he's giving last instructions to his 100 sons. And usually when we're about to do something for the last time, we think about it thoroughly. And so these were his last instructions ever to his sons. And so therefore, we could imagine he gave it some thought. He gave it some thought. So his instructions could be broken down in several different little categories like that. And we could be dwelling on these instructions for a very long time, but we're not going to do that. We're going to try to grasp the essence of these instructions, and we'll try also to pay attention to a few details like that. So, basic things. There's certain basic ignorance. Okay, I know. Many people, when they meet, they ask, what is new? And some people think that actually there is something new in due course of time. But actually, from the perspective of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's nothing new in this world. In other words, the content is always the same, and the only thing that changes is the packaging. So the packaging changes in form, shape, color, etc., maybe even smell. But the content of the packaging is pretty much always the same. So therefore, Lord Rishabhadev addressed some of the basic things that always go on in this world. Among the conditioned souls, the souls that are not pure in the sense that they're not pure devotees. And so he mentioned 4 things right in the beginning. Of course, he mentioned more than 4 things, but they neatly fall into 4 categories. One is sense gratification, the other thing is fruitive work, then he spoke about attachment, specifically to family life, and then he spoke of a hard knot in the heart. So, just real quick, sense gratification, this is usually the beginning. In other words, some sort of short-sightedness to gratify the senses. Srila Prabhupada a number of times said it's rather a normal thing to do. For example, if Srila Prabhupada used to go on a walk, morning walk, and he would go to a pleasant place, not to an unpleasant place. And he would go on a morning walk because it was pleasant, because this body requires certain amount of satisfaction of the senses, because the body is composed of senses. But something happens as we interact, as we, the souls, interact with our senses, with the world of sense objects. And that is that this interaction does not have to, but it tends to. But it tends to, how should I say it? It tends to do something to our eternal nature, the nature of pure love. And it changes that nature from love to lust. And of course, the Sanskrit word used is kama, which means not exactly lust, which means any desire that springs from a desire for selfish satisfaction. Selfish satisfaction. And so, in English, people sometimes say that power corrupts, but power in itself does not really corrupt. Power in itself is morally neutral. It is when we come in contact with power, in the case that we're not purely morally or spiritually healthy, when we come in contact with power, we use power for immoral reasons, and specifically for selfishness. And so, similar thing goes on in the when our senses interact with sense objects. When our senses interact with sense objects, we experience one of the 2 emotions. One is pleasing and the other one is displeasing. And so if it's pleasing, we tend to become, we don't have to, but we tend to, this tends to provoke selfishness in us. And so as we experience this selfishness, we experience attachment to this situation. And what this does, it literally defiles, it literally spoils, it almost destroys the pure living entity, which is like a unit of pure love of God. And by the way, love of God also means love of all souls. So we could easily think of soul, part and parcel of Krishna, as a one unit of prema, or divine love. But this divine love gets converted into lust or kama, or desire for selfishness, and tends to be nurtured when we come. Sunil, Hare Krishna. Welcome. Are you spying on me? No, okay, good. Welcome. Sorry to interrupt. Did you just move up here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. This is Sunil, everyone. He's served at ISKCON of San Diego for the last several years, and he just moved up here for work. So he's he's a really nice devotee. So in this way, a pure living entity gets literally contaminated. That's what happens. And so what otherwise is beautiful living entity becomes an ugly living entity. And from this incident, all badness comes about. Like literally all badness. If we were to think of any unwanted, any evil sin that goes on in the world, it springs from this type of an incident, from this kind of function of a malfunctioning heart. So, therefore, Lord Rishabhadev spoke. As a matter of fact, he used some really strong language. Those of you who are brave, we invite you to read the instructions of Lord Rishabhadev in the 5th canto. They're very healthy to read spiritually. So I use some very punchy words like that, describing the nature of sense gratification. And then, once this sense gratification kicked in, then the very next thing that happens is called fruitive work, or karmatmaka, that a soul becomes karmatmaka. Karmatmaka yena sharira bandham. What is karmatmaka, or what is this desire for fruitive work? This is... I have a rush of examples in my head, and they're all jammed. But okay. Here's one example. Second World War. Just to show you that this goes on everywhere in the world at all times, because this world is meant for this kind of thing. Before the Second World War, Germany experienced bad economy. And so when economy is bad, when economy of a country is bad, and the people are naturally disturbed because their basic needs for life are being disrupted. And so people are very concerned, and apparently the people in power were incapable of coming up with a solution. And that's where Hitler and his political party came in, simplifying the story. They did a few things right, and they found themselves in the position of power, which later on they managed to turn into a position of absolute power in the country. And so Hitler and his party, they grew greedy for acquisition of land. So little by little, for example, they just annexed Austria. They just took it. That was it. And no European nation reacted. No European nation responded to it. That was it. Later on, similar incident happened elsewhere, to spare you all the details. But basically, only when the European nations felt threatened, directly threatened by Germany under Hitler, did they take some actions? Now this is wrong on so many levels. Because according to those who are morally healthy, those whose hearts are healthy, those whose consciousness is healthy, you see, we all perform some activities. And as Srila Prabhupada says, every activity is preceded by an intent. So first there's an intention, and then there's an activity. So every activity is preceded by an intent. Now people who are morally healthy, people who are spiritually healthy, they do activities. Why? What is their intent? Their intent, they do activities because activities are good. In other words, when they understand that something is good, they do that which is good. And they also try to understand what is good so they can have a good reason to act. But act we must. Now people who are not like that, they act for any other reason. Like for example, European nations in the wake of the Second World War. They did not react to Germany's aggressive behavior because that was a good thing to do, but because it was a selfish thing to do. And so this is the nature of fruitive mentality. In other words, fruitive mentality is a mentality that urges one to act, and by the way, we all act. No one can avoid acting. Even that you're sitting here, you're here because you had a reason to come here. You came here for a reason. You have decided to be here. No one dragged you here. Or maybe someone did. You never know. Maybe your best friend dragged you over here. But we always make these decisions. So, fruitive worker is someone whose work, whose activities are not inspired by goodness, but inspired by selfishness. This is a fruitive worker. So fruitive worker is someone who engages in work because such a person will get something out of that work. Whereas sattvic person, good person, brahminical person, saintly person, pure person is a person who does things because things are good. This is very important because this fruitive mentality runs very, very, very deep. And it is so common in this world. As a matter of fact, they can hardly find anyone, minus the devotees, you can hardly find anyone that's devoid of this fault. And this is literally demonic. Excuse me for using such strong language, but it is not very obvious when this mentality does not result in some terribly ugly activities, but does result in small ugly activities, and the problem is very much the same. I remember last year I was flying somewhere, and on the flight in front of me there was a man and there was a woman. And the man was trying to get the attention of the woman and I guess get her interested in him. So he was asking her many questions, and she told him that she was going on a vacation somewhere, and he told her, oh, I know that place. And he said, and then he described certain locations, and he told her, if you go to this one specific location, that place is so beautiful for fishing, you are going to thoroughly enjoy it. And she said, oh, thank you. And I was thinking, oh, how horrible. In other words, not even for a second did it cross the minds of these two individuals that first of all, the almost only reason for the travel of this person was selfishness. And then second of all, when she got there, she was getting ready. She was planning upon getting there to do what? to kill other living beings, inflict pain on them. For what? For personal satisfaction. And so that personal satisfaction can rage so intensely that the person will even forget, will be incapable of perceiving other people's, other creatures' pain, because they're so blinded by the prospect of their personal satisfaction. And this is the mentality upon which this world runs. And this is very, very dangerous. This is not a platform of love. This is platform of selfishness, which is completely contrary to love. And so, therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 12th chapter, Krishna tells Arjuna that the perfection of life is to love God, to always think of God in love, which means bhakti, right? But he says, if you cannot do that, does anyone know what's the second thing? If you cannot do that, follow regulative principles. And if you cannot do that, you work for me. And if you cannot do that, correct. He says, take the fruits of your work and just give them to someone. Just give them, doesn't matter, just give them away. And then he says that this is better than jnana and better than yoga. Giving the fruits of our work to anyone is better than jnana and better than yoga. Why? Because this selfishness, this karmatmaka, this mentality that I engage in work with this intention for personal gratification or extended personal gratification, like my family or my, but it's always me. This is at the heart. This is at the heart of the disease of consciousness. And therefore it is extremely important for those who work and produce, and who are remunerated for their work. It is extremely important that they practice charity. As a matter of fact, Srila Prabhupada said, and even nowadays devotees struggle with that one, that devotees should give half of their income away. That's a lot. Actually, in San Diego, there was one Mataji. Every time I thought of her, I thought of, even now, every time I think of her, I think of Kolavich Sridhar. Who knows Kolavich Sridhar? Okay, many of you. Okay, if you don't know, sorry, maybe some other time, but she was very poor, like Kolavich Sridhar. She chanted Krishna's name day, night long. She was 99 years old. She was almost 100 when she passed away. And for the last 10 years of her life, she was simply waiting to die and hopefully go to Krishna. And every time she would wake up in the morning, she was Prabhupada's disciple. She would wake up in the morning and she would feel very sad because she would realize that she's still alive. Because her body became so old and painful to live in. But every day she would come to the temple and sweep the temple patio. I don't know how in the world she pulled that off, because she was nearly an invalid. But rain or shine, she was always there sweeping the patio. And whatever little she would wear discarded clothes so that she could save money to give to the temple. She kept only enough to pay for her rent. And she lived like that as long as I've known her, which is, she passed away last year, I think, and I've known her since 1999. And devotees told me she lived like that before also. So I guess it is possible. So she was giving way more than 50%. Anyhow, go back to our presentation. But I thought I should glorify this Vaishnavi. So fruitive work. And so, okay, next thing that Rishabhadev mentioned is the attachment to family life. Now, this has to be carefully understood, because sometimes people who read Srimad Bhagavatam, they struggle to balance two elements. One element is the family life, and the other element is no family life. So they tend to ask, so which one is it? Because sometimes the Bhagavatam makes these kind of very strong statements, like if you read this section of the Srimad Bhagavatam, teachings of Lord Rishabhadev, to his sons, he's saying that family life can be very dangerous. Now, please note that not only according to me, but according to Srimad Bhagavatam, according to Bhagavad Gita, according to Srila Prabhupada, there's nothing as normal as family life. It is perfectly normal. It is perfectly normal. But just like power is perfectly normal, just like senses are perfectly normal, just like sense objects are perfectly normal, there's nothing wrong with these things. All these things have been created by Krishna. All these things are God's energy. God's energy is not bad. God's energy is good. But we have a problem sometimes in the way we relate to these things. So now the tendency of people who suffer from material disease like this, where they have developed this kind of selfishness, is that to them, family life is a unit. Family is a unit within which they fortify their selfishness. And this is very, very common. So, in other words, that which is perfectly normal, that which is perfectly healthy, can turn into something which is perfectly unhealthy. And so therefore, sometimes those who have this disease in their heart, they actually take a vow not to come close to family life. Is there anything wrong with family life? No. Just like nothing is wrong with sweets, but the person who's addicted to sweets better stays away from any Hare Krishna temple. Well, better not. Better they come to temple. So similarly, the family unit can easily turn, and it tends to be the fort within which people cultivate their selfishness. And so therefore, throughout the Shastra, it is repeated so many times that those who are householders, those who live family life, they should really have the culture of giving. So not only that we serve Krishna, but we also give. That those of, not me, you guys. That those who are in family life, that they practice giving, and giving a lot. For example, Srila Prabhupada would quote that Vedic standard that if you're a householder, if you're a family person, before you eat your lunch, you should 3 times call out, make sure that everyone can hear you, is there anyone hungry? Of course, this is a detail, but the gist of it is that we learn to give, and that we never lose out of sight that the worst enemy to love and the worst enemy to prema, which is the goal of life, the love of God, the worst enemy is selfishness. And so therefore, Lord Rishabhadeva was really, really, really nailing it for his sons. Like he was really emphasizing this. And if you read that section, it is very strong. It makes some really hard statements. So that almost like he really wanted his sons to be good kings, to be good devotees, and so they don't make the mistake of what people often do when they're in family life, when they're in the position of power, that they become intoxicated by it. And he didn't want them to become intoxicated by it even a tiny bit. So to the extent we're truly seeking purity of our consciousness, love of God, to the extent we're truly seeking devotional life of devotional service, the life of bhakti, to that extent we will be very vigilant about this enemy. As a matter of fact, Krishna calls this enemy the eternal enemy of the soul. And he says that this is the thing that destroys the soul. Soul which is otherwise indestructible. So it is rather important. And then what happens is the tendency, so once one with this kind of disease, one has placed himself in a position of family life, then humongous, very complicated attachments develop in the heart. Very, very deep attachments develop in the heart. So deep that person can often become completely oblivious to them, even incapable of perceiving them. So, that was a quickie thing that Lord Rishabhadeva pointed out to his sons. And then he moved on to the solution. And the solution is something which he actually repeated before. And he said that the solution is that you should surrender to God. Actually, the word used is prapad. Prapad means to move forward. Pra means forward, and pada means foot. Means a step forward towards God. What did Srila Prabhupada say? What happens when you place an iron rod in fire? Becomes red hot, becomes like fire. So similarly, coming closer to God makes us like God. Not in the sense that we become like God, a big Ishvara, big controller, and but we gain the qualities, the spiritual qualities that are inherent to God. So he told them you should surrender to God, which literally means approach God. And how they should do that, he repeated again, they should do that by seeking out a Paramahamsa. In other words, greatly elevated devotee. Okay. Once they have done this, so this basically means that all of us who are serious about our spiritual lives, we should have our spiritual guide. And our guide should be as highly elevated spiritually, personality as possible. And of course, please note that to have a spiritual teacher, have a spiritual master, means that we're actually guided by the spiritual master. Because the way things are in the modern times, we can have a spiritual master but not be guided by the spiritual master. So that means that we should definitely have a spiritual mentor. And more elevated the mentor, the better. As a matter of fact, Rishabhadeva says our spiritual guide should be a Paramahamsa. There was this one Indian gentleman that sort of almost like harassed Srila Prabhupada, demanding from Srila Prabhupada, asking from Srila Prabhupada that why are you insisting so much on having a living spiritual master? And Prabhupada said, because he can pull your So if we were to go by this instruction, this means that we have to have a guide, someone who can see our actions, definitely. I was going to say daily actions, but then I thought maybe not daily, but at least weekly. Someone who's there that can correct us when correction is needed, and encourage us when the encouragement is needed. But someone who's there to monitor our spiritual lives. This is very helpful. And then the next thing he said something very interesting. It says, don't become attached. Once he described the process by which one can be liberated from material existence, he said, don't become attached to the means by which you attain liberation. Now this is a very profound statement which is actually stated in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam as well. What does this mean? That we should not become attached to the means of our liberation. That means that we're so thoroughly honest that we're interested only in the absolute truth, that which is absolutely true. Because you see, people often claim to be interested in what is the ultimate truth, but they're actually attached to the process. In the Bhagavad Gita and in the 4th canto of the Bhagavatam, there is a difference made between Tattvavadi and Vedavadi. These two are being contrasted, Tattvavadi and Vedavadi. Any guesses in the light of current discussion? What's the difference between a Tattvavadi and a Vedavadi? Tattva means the truth, and Veda means the Vedic scriptures. Very good. If I had a cookie, I would give you one cookie. Or like Nirantara Prabhu has a bell. When someone gives a good answer, he rings it. Thank you. That is the difference between a Tattvavadi and Vedavadi. Vedavadi is attached to the Vedas. But Tattvavadi is attached to the truth. These two don't have to be different, but when they do differ, Tattvavadi is attached to the truth. For example, Krishna told Arjuna that majority of the Vedic literatures are actually materialistic. That they deal with the three, right in the Bhagavad Gita, that the Vedas mainly deal with the three modes of material nature, and therefore you should actually reject them. But we see how often do people become so attached to their religious tradition or any kind of tradition, even to the point of exclusion of the absolute truth. These people have a difficult time understanding people who are also seeking truth, but in other traditions, because they cannot understand the essence. So therefore he told them, don't be small-minded. Means to the end is different from the end itself. Which, by the way, is not true in Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, the means and the end is the same. But this specifically refers to the lengthy process by which a conditioned soul is taken from the position of ignorance to the position of truth. From the position of darkness to the position of light. And so therefore, not only Vedic tradition, but many traditions, they give all kinds of prescriptions and proscriptions, that by following which you will eventually become a better person, and then hopefully maybe even interested in transcendental subject matters. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I've been asked by Hindu audiences to speak to them on the Bhagavad Gita so they could feel proud Indians. Bhagavad Gita that teaches that you're not Indian. Bhagavad Gita that teaches you're not the body, you're the soul, and they're asking me to speak to them on the Bhagavad Gita so they could feel more of an Indian. Proud Indian. This is typical attachment to the means rather than to the end. All these bodies that we have are super temporary. And some of you are stuck in brown bodies, some are stuck in yellow bodies, some are stuck in red bodies, and the colors go on. But that's all they are. They're just material bags in which pure spirit soul lives that has nothing to do with this world. So, therefore he told them, don't become attached to the means. Be attached to the end. Okay, real quick. Next thing that Lord Vrishabhadev told his sons was that he described the situation of materialists, because he's been really warning them about materialistic attitude and contamination. And he told them, don't become materialists. Why? Because if you become a materialist, you enter the world of envy. And once you've entered the world of envy, you suffer. And not only that you suffer, but you become a cause of other beings suffering. So, in the devotee circles, we're taught to always concern ourselves with the good of others. And so we all consider ourselves servants of the servants of Krishna. That is what we consider ourselves. And of course, if you were to compare a society within which everyone considered themselves servants to the society in which everyone is demanding to be served, the picture becomes very clear. So therefore, you warn them, don't do that. Don't let yourself be pulled into the world of envy. And then he proceeded that that one feature of the ignorant, once they have become so attached to the selfishness, is that they themselves cannot perceive this. They cannot perceive this. And so therefore, because they cannot perceive this, you should never encourage them. You should never encourage them in the name of religion to become fruitive. Which is, by the way, if you ever studied religion, this is like the major thing in all religions. In India, you have priests who go to people's homes and bless homes, etc., etc. I grew up in a Catholic family, and the very same thing goes on. Priest comes to your home, he sprinkles some water that he calls holy, and they also have incense. They smoke up the place, and they call the smoke holy. And then you give him some money, and then the priest leaves, and then you think, okay, now everything will be good. now my material life will be successful. And so this is, and the scriptures, not only Vedic scriptures, but scriptures I just studied Bible last year. I took a Bible study because I really wanted to know what's in it. Same thing. There's so many, page after page, tell you, if you obey God, God will give you, and then it lists goats and sheep and tents, and this is Middle East way back. All these kind of promises. But Lord Vrishabhadev told his son, you're about to lead the world, so don't do this. Don't do this injustice to people. They don't know. They're ignorant. They're blind. They cannot perceive this. And then if you, in the name of religion, encourage them to be fruitive like this, you will have ruined their lives. This was his perspective. So also we as devotees, this is something that we can take a note of. And then he proceeded to say that that's not enough. He added one more thing to it, which is that basically, unless you can free your dependents from the cycle of birth and death, you should not become even a parent. For those of you who were there for the morning class, life is like traffic. Right? You have to act. Life is forcing you to act. And because life is forcing you to act, you ought to know what is the right type of action. Many people are compelled to become parents, but they also have to understand that unless they're capable of helping the souls that appear within their families, help them out of the cycle of birth and death, they're actually being violent towards these souls, which have been entrusted to their care. And this is a great responsibility. So Vrishabhadeva, very strong. It's like these are his sons, so he's really, really hammering it, making sure they really get it. After this, Lord Vrishabhadeva goes back to the essence of it all, and he begins to describe God. But then one interesting thing, he describes himself, because he's incarnation of Vishnu. He describes God and he describes himself, but then he does one interesting thing. And what is that interesting thing? And that is that he then goes on to describe his heart. And he says that my heart are the pure devotees. Are devotees who are purely devoted to me. They are my heart. And so why is he saying this? Because now he's going back again, right? The essence of it all ultimately is to be focused on God. But then the moment he said this, he's doing something which religious people tend to so often to forget. And that is, when you think of God, you cannot fail to think of souls. Because if you worship God, but you have no respect for souls, it's like patting a person on the shoulder while biting his foot. Souls are literally an expansion of God. They're inseparable from God. They are part of God. And religious people so often tend to forget this. And so therefore, he is really stressing this. And he says, those who are kind to all beings are kind to me. And then he goes back. Because what happens is, first we have one anomaly, which is that religious people tend to focus on God and trample over other beings. Be disrespectful towards other beings, right? And then here you have God telling you, no, you should be kind to other people, because by being kind to other people, you're being kind to me. Now you have another anomaly, which is that people focus on people and forget God. So they become mundane altruists. Opening hospitals, feeding poor. These are all nice, good activities. But But people who leave God out of this picture don't help anyone. What they do, they simply postpone problems. You feed the poor, and then once the poor has digested what you fed him, he's hungry again. And even if you make the poor person rich, still there's life after life after life, and none of this is actually solved. So Srila Prabhupada said, this is like when a person carries a burden on one shoulder, and then when he gets tired, then he lifts the burden from that shoulder and places it on the other shoulder and says, oh, life is nice. But the burden is still there. So therefore we cannot leave God out of the picture. So one anomaly is to focus only on God and exclude God's energy, specifically living beings. And the other anomaly is when God says, no, by respecting other beings you respect me, then people focus only on other souls. And they forget God. And so therefore Rishabhadeva again returns back to God. And then again people, of course, some people are unbalanced, so they focus only on God. Because to comprehend both, to comprehend God and God's energies is actually difficult. And what is required to do this? It is required to actually, spiritual advancement is required to accomplish this. It is not uncommon for devotees to get into fights, which means anyone who does not feel a great sense of respect for any being is not very spiritually advanced and is having difficulty to balance the two elements, God and God's energies. Okay. And then Rishabhadeva again turned towards he did it twice. Then he again turned towards living beings. But specifically this time he turned towards Brahmanas. He described the whole creation. He said how there's inert matter. Better than inert matter is actually are conscious beings. And amongst conscious beings, those that move are better than those that don't move, and those that walk are better than those that crawl, and like it went on, and eventually came to the topmost person, which is God Himself. And then you would expect Him to stop there, but then He says no. But He says, I, speaking of Himself, but I worship Brahmanas. And so Brahmanas are the best. Because Brahmanas, if they're truly Brahmanas, not like the Brahmana I met in Hollywood selling sausages, but true Brahmanas, those who know Brahman, those who know God, those who are renounced and humble and pure, who control their speech and whose deeds are dedicated to God, they are the best, the truest blessing to the society. And of course, Srila Prabhupada said, following the teachings of his own spiritual master, he said that the better than Brahmanas are actually Vaishnavas. Because being a Brahmana is contained within any Vaishnava, of whatever caste the Vaishnava might be. Why did he say that the Brahmanas are the best? First he gave, and that will be the end of his teachings. Oh no, there's one more instruction. There's one more instruction, I forgot. Why are the Brahmanas the best? And so in order to illustrate how the Brahmanas are the best, he gave example how people offer things to God. And in those days people offered things to God through the process of Agni Hotra, or the fire sacrifice. And so literally items would be offered in the fire of sacrifice, and that was considered that God would eat, that the fire was like the mouth of God, that you would literally offer things to God by offering them into the fire. Actually, they were offered to Agni Hotra, like that. But he said that actually offerings that are offered into the mouth of a Brahmana are superior. This is one of the reasons why Vaishnavas tend to feed Vaishnavas. And which is also a reason why it's difficult to be a Brahmana, a teacher, a renunciate, and travel around ISKCON. Everyone wants to feed you. more than you can healthily digest. You know, when Prabhupada was in India, Prabhupada traveled with a large team of young devotees whose service was simply to eat. I'm not joking. That was their service. Because Prabhupada was, of course, of age and poor fire of digestion, and he couldn't take much, but he would have his disciples take all the prasad that was offered. And he told them that their service was to eat, more the better. And devotees who traveled with Prabhupada remember that they were eating a lot. Because so many devotees, so many people wanted to host Prabhupada and have Prabhupada speak at their home, visit their home, etc., etc. So there were like 3, 4, 5, 6 engagements every day. And so all they have to do was go there, and then after Prabhupada would speak, they would eat. So now you know where it comes from. And then he said how the Brahmanas are the best, but then he proceeded to say why the Brahmanas are the best. And he said that the Brahmanas are the best, why? Because Brahmanas know the Vedas. And not only that Brahmanas know the Vedas, but they're literally embodiment of the Vedas. And then Lord Rishabhadev said that Vedas are my sound incarnation. And because the Brahmanas are the embodiment of the Vedas, they are none different from me. And so also in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, we also say that there is a book Bhagavata, and we say there is a person Bhagavata. And we don't say that only Brahmins should become embodiment of the Vedic knowledge, but we also say that everyone, every Vaishnava, this is why Vaishnava is better than a Brahmin, that every Vaishnava should become Bhagavata person. That we actually become repository, or not repository, but will literally become a home of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His teachings. This is also described in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam. Veda pranihito dharmo, hyad opposite to that, hyad dharma tad viparyayaha. Vedo narayana sakshat swayambhu iti shushruma. This is very important. Why is this important? Because it says, what is dharma? Dharma is that which is given in the Vedas. What is adharma? That which is opposed to that which is given in the Vedas. This is very important to understand. Sounds like a small detail, but I have attended certain Vaishnava assemblies where discussion was held as to what would be the best course of action, and not even once were the Vedas quoted. This is, according to the Vedas, atheism. So that's why the Brahmanas are considered the best, and Vaishnavas even better, because they're literally the embodiment of the Vedas, or book Bhagavata, and they, in this way, they're personification of God's instructions. And so when we reason about this world and how to do things in this world, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, this is the proper course of action. not to always use our own intelligence we should always use our intelligence, but we should use our intelligence to understand the Vedic instructions. This is also stated by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, Karya akarya vyavastita. That one should know what is to be done and what is not to be done by what? By that which is stated in the Shastra. Tasmat Shastra Pramanam te karya akarya vyavastita. You should be situated, you should understand what is to be done, what is not to be done on the basis of the Shastra. This verse appears towards the end of the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is entitled Divine and Demonic Natures. In other words, what Krishna is saying is that those who are of divine nature, they reason by using Vedas for the starting point. And the demons do not. They give their own reasons. Sounds like a little detail, but it's actually a big thing. Okay. After this, Lord Rishabhadev took to a life of renunciation. First, it is described he lived like a madman in the home. And then it is described that he took the sacrificial fire and placed it in his heart and left home. Which means that he internalized the process of yajna or sacrifice. But anyhow, that's actually rather a large discussion that I sort of covered on Friday night. But I shall stop here and ask for any questions or comments, if there are any. Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, thank you very much for this class. You give a very good example of persons who pursue to please God, to take a loss in the process, like opening hospitals or doing charitable work, or the opposite, they pursue God, but they forget about His energy. So, you also mentioned that Krishna consciousness, it doesn't happen that the end and the means to achieve that end is the same.
Yes.
Can you elaborate?
That's actually very smart. I'm impressed. Thank you. It is stated that the constitutional position of the soul is that of a servant of a servant of a servant of Krishna. And to literally learn to serve everyone, devotees and non-devotees, appropriately. We don't go around and if a non-devotee asks us for a sausage, we don't give him a sausage, because that's not service, that is disservice. But we do serve devotees and non-devotees. We serve animals and plants. Vaishnava wants to elevate all of the souls back to Godhead. So that is literally activity. That is literally the eternal activity, the eternal nature of the soul. So as we learn to live like that here, to that extent, we qualify ourselves to live in Krishna's, directly in Krishna's presence or Krishna's abode, where we see all beings, all other souls as objects of our service. Throughout the Bhagavatam, very often when these kings are mentioned, it is, like for example in the story of Narad Muni, it is described that Vyasadeva, not King, Vyasadeva in this case. Vyasadeva, he wrote all of those Vedic literatures and he was feeling not right. And Narad Muni appeared and he told him, he was kind of being sarcastic. Says, well, you you have selflessly all of your life served other beings, and you have never ever thought of anything else besides being a servant, besides serving other beings, and now you're not feeling good. What is the problem? But we oh, thank you. So the picture we get there is that also kings in other places are like Lord Vrishabhadev telling his sons that this is something that a soul should always do, and this is the position for which a soul, if the soul wants to be pure, should always aspire for. And so as we do that in this world, we do that, we continue. That activity literally moves us out of this world. So yes, Vaishnavas do charitable things. Vaishnavas do charitable things, such as, I don't want to say anything outrageous, but for example, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would give even money to beggars. In front of the temples in India, he would literally give money, which is something that we hardly ever do because we are afraid people will go and buy sausage or something, alcohol, or of course, when that's obvious, we shouldn't do it. But the Prabhupada, for example, his family were not devotees. His sons, they were not really Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada, before he left this world, Prabhupada made sure that as long as they lived, they would be financially taken care of. So what I'm trying to say is, what I'm trying to do is give a few examples where people who we look up to, like Srila Prabhupada, they have done what we would call charitable work. So there is room. Vaishnava definitely doesn't like to see people being hungry and needy, etc., etc. But Vaishnava also understands that unless person is brought to the position of pure devotional service, if Vaishnava has managed to do anything, was simply to postpone person's trouble. Is that okay? Okay. Okay, anything else? Going once? Going twice? Good, I have to go. Thank you for your attention, and all glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, and to all the assembled Vaishnavas. Hare Krishna. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yes. Hare Krishna. I remember you.
You have a very good memory.
So I'm bad with names. Please forgive me for that, but I don't remember.
Thank you for coming. Sorry, and other Haridas who gives us so many things how busy and we get all this sleeping for some activity. Yeah. That's one month of COVID series. Like, we were like over the weekend we were counting yesterday. Yesterday there were like 8 or 10 fishing activities.